The 25th of October 1415. A muddy corridor outside Agincourt, northern France. King Henry V of England, commanding the English host, plants his line between two woods. Around 6,000 men, longbowmen packed on the flanks, dismounted men at arms in the center, sick, hungry, and trying to reach Calais alive. Across the churned field, Constable Charles d'Albret commands the French vanguard, with Marshal Jean de la Maingré, Boucicaut, beside him. Banners stack deep, horses snort, armor clinks. The French intend to crush the English outright, or take the king as a prize. But let's change one thing. A Boeing CH-47F Chinook, 2007 era, drops into 1415 like a steel cathedral with rotors. Length 50 feet 9 in. Rotor diameter 60 feet each, two of them. Max gross weight 50,000 lb. Payload 24,000 pounds external, or 10,000 pounds inside. 2 Honeywell T55GA714A turboshafts, 4,868 shp each. Cruise 170 miles per hour. Max 196 miles per hour. Range 400 miles. Service ceiling 20,000 feet. It hauls 33 troops, or 24 litters. Defensive mounts for 7.62 mm or 0.50 calories. Door guns optional, because the real weapon is mobility. And the medieval command and control system has no menu option for helicopter. The French are not extras. Constable Charles d'Albret leads a front rank of armored men at arms in plate and mail, built for close killing. Marshal Jean de la Maingré, Boucicaut, drives discipline into the vanguard. Duke Charles of Orléans commands a main battle behind them. Duke Jean I of Bourbon anchors another. They mass roughly 12,000 to 15,000 men, with about 8,000 men at arms, plus crossbowmen and archers. Their plan is simple and brutal. Push the English center, ride down the longbow wings, and finish it with fresh waves. Lances, swords, axes, and maces do not care about courage, they care about contact. In tight terrain, that contact becomes a traffic jam with blades. At about 8 a.m., the French vanguard starts its advance into the mud. At 8 a.m., the Chinook's AN/ARN 147 Doppler radar paints a moving smear. 3 dense blocks. Front edge at 1.6 miles, closing at roughly 3 miles per hour through mud. In the cockpit, CW3 Jason Miles calls. Contacts confirmed, mass infantry, no friendlies forward. SSG Elena Park in the back is already on intercom. General quarters. Door guns cold and less called. Cargo rig ready. At 8:01 a.m., Miles drops to 80 feet AGL and slides left along the English line at 120 knots. The crew chief kicks the rear ramp open. At 8:02 a.m., 6 bundled timber and stake pallets about 1,500 pounds each go out on gravity. They land 300 yards in front of the French vanguard, across the narrowest part of the corridor. From the French side, at 8:03 a.m., Constable Charles d'Albret sees the field ahead erupt into flying mud and tumbling beams as if a giant has thrown a barricade from the sky. No trebuchets, no wagons, nothing moving on the ground. At 8:04 a.m., his first ranks halt. The second ranks keep pushing. Formation buckles into a wedge of men, horses, and panic. At 8:05 a.m., arrows start to fall again because the French are now standing still in a killing lane. At 8:06 a.m., Marshal Jean de la Maingré, Boucicaut, shouts for the mounted elements to force the flanks. 300 cavalry to the left wood line, 300 to the right, to roll up the archers. It's the correct medieval answer. At 8:07 a.m., the Chinook answers with physics. Miles yaws into a hover 60 yards off the French left, 30 feet above the mud. Rotor wash turns the surface into churned soup. Visors go opaque, horses rear and twist. A charge needs traction. They get a slip and fall. At 8:08 a.m., Park finally clears the guns. If they break for the aircraft, short bursts only. The left door M240 sends 12 round taps. Not a massacre, just punctuation. At 600 meters, the rounds snap into shields and the ground in front. The cavalry's line dissolves into individuals. At 8:09 a.m., Duke Charles of Orléans tries to reform the vanguard with flags and runners. Runners can't outrun a helicopter. At 8:10 a.m., the Chinook transitions. It hooks a 4,000 lb sling of English stakes and drops them in 20 seconds to seal a gap between timber piles. At 8:11 a.m., the crew logs it as field expedient obstacle emplacement. Nobody uses an exclamation point. At 8:12 a.m., King Henry V commits his center forward 50 yards because the French vanguard is now pinned, not advancing. The Chinook shifts from disruption to isolation. At 8:13 a.m., Miles climbs to 300 feet and sprints 0.8 miles downrange at 150 knots, then drops behind the French front to the main battle. Park kicks out a final load. 3 wagons worth of bundled brush and timber, about 10,000 pounds total, dumped across the rear approach. At 8:14 a.m., Duke Jean I of Bourbon sees his support route disappear under a fresh barrier that wasn't there one breath ago. The vanguard is trapped between English arrows ahead and an impossible blockade behind. At 8:15 a.m., the French last attempt is brave and direct. 40 men at arms break from the mass and run at the machine, swinging poleaxes like they can reach the sky. At 8:16 a.m., the Chinook backs off because it's not invincible. It has finite fuel, no spare parts in 1415, and one lucky crossbow bolt into a rotor blade is a career-ending maintenance issue. By 8:20 a.m., the French vanguard collapses into a stationary crush, with 2 mounted flanking probes broken and 1 main battle delayed. The English line is now advancing into prisoners, not a charge. The fight finishes by 10:05 a.m. French losses are 3,200 dead, including Constable Charles d'Albret and Duke Jean I of Bourbon. 6,100 captured, including Marshal Boucicaut and Duke Charles of Orléans. 0 ships, 0 aircraft. Wrong century. English losses are 430 dead, with King Henry V alive and uninjured. The Chinook takes 2 crossbow hits in the skin, no rotor damage, and burns 1,240 pounds of fuel. It lands with 3,900 pounds remaining. Door guns expend 186 rounds of 7.62. Missiles remaining 0, because there are none. This result stands. The French army breaks without a decisive melee. Henry's heralds carry the count to Calais. Surviving French captains flee to Paris and report the vanguard trapped by falling timber and a wind-making engine to the Dauphin's council. Without a functional French high command, d'Albret dead, Bourbon dead, Orléans and Boucicaut in English hands, Armagnac politics would fracture faster, and the Civil War would intensify in 1416 instead of stabilizing around new field armies. Without the prestige of a near-victory narrative, the French crown would struggle to re-raise ransoms and cavalry contracts that historically rebuilt pressure on Henry after 1415. With prisoners this valuable and English losses this low, Henry would push harder in Normandy earlier, taking towns in 1416 to 1417 with fewer pauses for manpower. Without a credible French counterstroke, Burgundy would have even less reason to reconcile, and English influence in northern France would likely lock in years sooner. The long decline shifts onto France first, not England. So that's the ugly math of it. One heavy lift helicopter doesn't win Agincourt with firepower, it wins it by turning the battlefield into a traffic accident the French can't unjam. Now here's the question I can't let go of. If you're a French commander watching that machine work, do you still commit the main battle? Or do you retreat before the arrows finish the job? Or what do you think would happen? And if you're curious what would happen if a single modern MRAP rolled into the Battle of Hastings and tried to bully a shield wall, check out the video on screen now. Thanks for watching.